All right. Shalom, shalom. I'd like to start off by saying, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Kol Haloyim La Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Ruchakadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Blessings and salutations to the hopeful elect that's scattered abroad, the Akim and the Akwat that's listening in. Yahweh Rat is our Lord, willing that the lesson is edifying. It's the brother Sharab on Mawan back at you with another lesson. And going into the title, all right, A Song of Oppression, Tribe of Asher, all right. And basically, I remembered this song when I was going into the lesson yesterday. I was going into how King James was a so-called black man, all right, and going into that book, all right, I was going into basically how the true Scottish, all right, the true, Irishmen, basically a lot of those countries out there in Europe, they will say, the European countries, all right, they go back to being originally by, Israelites. They go back to being originally Israelites when you understand the history of our people, all right. But you had, what was his name? Oliver Cromwell, all right, that basically, as a matter of fact, to make a point real quick, I'll just go backtrack real quick. I'm not going to go too much into it. Just want to bring it out to prove the point of this song that I'm going to bring out, because this song is basically a song of oppression, and it shows that, Judah, all right, the southern kingdom were brought out here to the Americas. Okay, so with that being said, hold on real quick. Shalom, Yahweh Barakatah. All right, so going into that real quick, this is where was it? There you go. That the Stuarts, all right, that the so-called black man, all right, he was, ruling, okay, Scotland, and in the time of, when King James was king, basically, all right, and they were ruling France, Spain, Ireland, England, Britain, Wales, all right. So basically, they were the original, the original people of those countries, okay, because they were the ones ruling at that time. And then eventually what you had was you had the so-called white men, all right, they will come and, take over the places, take over those countries, and then they will call themselves those names, you see. Then they came and called themselves the French, and, there were Portugal, there were the Irish, that's what Esau does. He basically takes over everybody's land, and then eventually will take over their culture and call themselves, all right, those names, all right. So going into that, Oliver Cromwell, Salakia, was what I was speaking about yesterday, and I'll just read this part again, all right, to give you some insight of what I'm about to go into next with the song. So it says in 1641, Cromwell had 300,000 black Irish sold into the North Atlantic slave trade, and in 1650 he had 100,000 Irish Scottish children sold into Barbados. All right, there is an interesting law that Cromwell had published, and it read, it says, Oliver Cromwell Edict 1653, those who fail to transplant themselves to Connaught and or Clare within 6 months shall be guilty of high treason. You will then be sent into America or some other part beyond the sea. The Royal African Company sent 249 ships to the West Indies, sending 60,000 African and Irish into the Americas and West Indies. Make no mistake about it, these people are here in this colony with us. All right. So that's the point I wanted to bring out, how our people were being sold, all right, and coming over here, all right, to the Americas, and they were being scattered throughout the West Indies also, and that's why you have our people to this day in those areas. Okay, so now with that being said, let me grab this. All right, this song that I'm about to bring out is a song of oppression. Okay, and before I do that, let me grab this. It says, large numbers of enslaved Africans were taken to Colombia, then part of New Granada, all right, during the transatlantic slave trade during the 16th century. Cartagena served as a primary port with captives forced into manual labor in gold mining, agriculture, and urban services. All right. And then it says, key timeline. It says the earliest slave trade records to Granada date back to 1573, with major inflows occurring between 1593 and 1601 and 1617 through 1625. It says most enslaved people arrived from Angola, Guinea, and other regions of West Central Africa. And we know that because during the transatlantic slave trade, that's what a lot of them were being taken from, all right, from West Africa. That's why in West Africa, a lot of those people are our people, all right. And you already had basically the Northern Kingdom here that came here through the Assyrian Empire, which I'll grab that real quick. This is a second. This is Second Ezra's. This is Second Ezra's 14 and where's that at? Oh no, not 14. So like a 13. Where's it at? 40, 13 and 40. It says those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, whose Salmanasar the king of Assyria led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took the counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. All right, and that country was basically America. It says that they might keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into Euphrates by the narrow places of the river. For the Most High then showed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely a year and a half, and the same region is called Azareth. And when you go into the Jewish encyclopedia, all right, it tells you that Azareth was America. As a matter of fact, Azareth Jewish Encyclopedia. All right, when you go into that, it tells you right here. Grab it real quick. Yeah, it says Lord William is still there. Yep. This is it says the name of the land beyond the great river, far away from the habitation of man, in which the 10 tribes of Israel will dwell, observing the laws of Moses until the time of the restoration, according to Second Ezra's. All right, it says Columbus identified America with this land. You see, so that's why Columbus came over here, because he was infatuated with the book of Ezra's, right? That's why he came over here with 12 Hebrew translators, one of them, the top being Louis D. Torres, all right? And he came over here with 12 Hebrew translators. Why? Because he knew that the Hebrews were here, okay? And he wanted to see for himself. So when he came over here, that's why they already knew, all right, our people were here. All right, so basically, when the transatlantic slave trade came about, okay, our people that were of the Northern Kingdom were here in America. All right, so going back, all right, to what I was bringing out about Colombia, all right, that Cartagena was a main port, okay, for slaves to come in, basically. Okay, and it said, where was I? Origins. Most enslaved people arrived from Angola, Guinea, and regions of West Central Africa. And it says purpose: enslaved labor was essential to the Spanish colonial economy, particularly for mining in the Pacific lowlands and agriculture in the Cauca Valley. Then it says significance. This forced migration resulted in a significant Afro-Colombian population today. And it makes sense, perfect sense of why, when you really go deep into the roots of Colombia, when you go deep into the roots of any of our, Latino brothers, right? Going into the Northern Kingdom, they are very dark skinned. They were almost considered as so-called black men also. All right, which at the end of the day, all tribes, we all come from the waters of Judah. All right, so it makes perfect sense anyway. All right, but a lot of people will try to say, well, the Latinos ain't part of the tribes of Israel. People just try to take away the Latin tribes from them. All right, when you had Latin tribes that were dark, just like the Southern Kingdom. Okay, so it goes, this forced migration resulted in a significant Afro-Colombian population today, with major cultural influences, including the origins of cumbia dance. Okay, so let me grab this other part. It says the Iberian slave trade, and that's something that I was going into yesterday. All right, in that same book, it's called The Negro Question. Part 4, The Missing Link. All right, they speak about that Iberian slave trade, which is basically going into that transatlantic slave trade. It says the Iberian slave trade in Africa began with the Portuguese, who transported prisoners to the Madeira Islands and Azores. Though the Treaty of Alcacovas in 1479, the Kingdom of Castle recognized the Portuguese primacy in the African slave trade, which would make them the main providers of enslaved labor for centuries to come. This reached a new dimension with the colonization of the New World, since the subjugated native population was insufficient for the exploitation of natural resources, and their number was reduced day by day, either because the spread of disease or death from abuse by Spaniards. Thus, the massive trafficking of African slaves to the provinces that would be the viceroyalty of New Granada would begin only after the indigenous population was decimated, beginning in the second half of the 16th century, Salakia. So I brought that up for a reason, because, and then it says another part here, says the countries that control the transatlantic slave trade market in terms of number of slave ships were United Kingdom, Portugal, and France. And the reason I bring that out is because that's what that book was talking about, how basically the white man came and then took over, all right, our people, and then they called themselves, the Portuguese, the Portugal, the French, the Irish, and things like that, United Kingdom, all of that. All right. So what you see in the background is a picture of a slave, all right, that is basically Shalom, Yahawah Shem Shah Barakathon to you, brother. All right. So what you see in the background right there is a slave is a statue of a slave out there in Colombia. Okay. Now the song that I'm about to play, all right, it's a heavy song. All right. And it just goes to show our people, were oppressed together, man. As the scriptures say, Judah and Israel were oppressed together. Okay. And I'm going to play the video now. I'm going to play it, and then I'll translate it for you, what's being said. Because even the video itself in the background is heavy, because they're in chains and they're actually reenacting what they're singing. Okay. So grab that real quick. Oh shit, I had it. There you go. Okay. And this is a famous song that Spanish people, you know, the Spanish people, they like to dance to. All right. So basically it starts off by saying, it says, I want to tell you, my brother, a little piece of black history, and they turned it into a song. So he's speaking about what happened in the 1600s, and that's why I read what I was just reading, to prove to you that that transatlantic slave trade was already happening in the 1600s. All right, and that you had the so-called, you know, you had the southern tribes already being brought over here, and one of the places that they were being brought to, which was the main port, was in Cartagena, Colombia. All right, along with, you know, the West Indies. All right, and then you had the Americas also. Okay, so check this out. Hold on. Matter of fact, let me open this up for y'all to see. There you go. So, play it.
Quiero contarle, mi hermano, un pedacito de la historia negra, de la historia nuestra, caballero, y dice así.
Yeah, they got them in slaves right there. Spaniard was leading them.
En los años 1600, cuando el tirano mandó.
So basically what he just said there was in the 1600s when the tyrant reigned. All right. It says, matter of fact, let me read it for you because I put it down on paper so I could just read it to you real quick. It says in the 1600s, when the tyrant reigned, that history lived on the streets of Cartagena. When those slave traders came here, Africans in chains kissed my land because of perpetual slavery. And then he says perpetual slavery 3 times after that. So that goes to show you, you know, the perpetual hatred that these heathens already have for us. All right. Especially who? Esau. All right. Esau always had that perpetual hatred toward our people, man. All right. And the Lord basically said that we will be given into the hands of our enemies, right? Because we were worshiping upon, you know, different gods, making sacrifices unto devils. All right. He even said that we will be given into as a curse. All right. Let me grab that real quick. Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter. All right. This is Deuteronomy 28 and where's that swifter than the eagle. Okay, 49. The Lord Yahweh shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. Okay, and then it goes into yeah, that's the point on that. And then when you go to 68, it tells you how it says, and the Lord Yahweh shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. All right. And Egypt again was going into America. All right. By the way, whereof I spake unto thee, that thou shalt see it no more again. All right. Our homeland. Right. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and that no man shall buy you. All right. Meaning that no man shall redeem you at that time. All right. So let me play that video.
En los años 1600, cuando el tirano mandó, las calles de Cartagena, aquella historia vivió. Cuando aquí llegaban esos negreros, africanos en cadenas, besaban mi tierra, esclavitud perpetua. Esclavitud perpetua.
And the reason I bring out this song is because remember, man, they tell you everything, all right, through movies and music. And in order for this song to be played and become famous, they had to go somehow through uh the white man to be able to publish the video, all of that, man. And see, he made them basically bring out this video in the background to tell you something, to show you that look, this is how our people were being oppressed, man. Because he's literally telling you a true story that happened in the 1600s. All right.
Un matrimonio africano, esclavos de un español, que les daba muy maltrato, y a su negra le pegó.
So then what he said there, he said an African marriage, slaves of a Spaniard, he treated him really poorly and he hit his black woman. All right, that's what he's basically about to go into. And then after that, he starts singing. And it was then that the handsome black man rebelled. He took revenge for his love, and you can still hear it in Bergia. Don't hit my black woman, because that's what the name of the song is. No le pega la negra, and that means not to hit my black woman. All right, and basically, you know, he continues to sing on how he was being oppressed. All right. And his black woman was being, you know, smacked around basically. And that's how they'll do the dance basically in the background. All right. And then it just continues to go into, you know, how the abuser hit the young woman. All right. And he was telling her no, and they kept telling them no, you know, because it was hurting his soul. It was breaking them down. It was breaking them apart. All right. And see, this is the shit that our people actually went through, man. All right. You can only imagine in that time when, you know, at that time, our people didn't even, you know, they were already lost. Okay. They were already lost and they didn't even know that that was their own brothers, you know. So when they saw the so-called black man being brought into, you know, slavery into their country, you know, they must have witnessed a lot of, you know, our people from the northern tribes. All right. They must have seen a whole lot of hell between them people, man, you know, and yeah, and spiritually, okay, they were, you know, had a feel for that. You know, they had an understanding of that. You know, they didn't like that. Why? Because through the spirit, we're all brothers and sisters, you see. So, you know, it definitely, you know, they felt some type way upon that. And they were basically, you know, they probably definitely, you know, tried to basically fight against them, all of that, rebel against them, you know, because at the same time, remember, as the transatlantic slave trade was being, you know, brought this way and they were bringing the southern tribes, man, they were taking people that were already on this side and taking them back to their countries, you see. So there was a whole lot of shit going on, all right, in that time. All right, but let me finish the rest of it.
Oye, ven, no le pegue a la negra. Oye, esa negra se me respeta. No le pegue a la negra. Se escucha la negra. No le pegue a la negra.
And it's heavy that you be seeing when you go to these countries, like, because it was crazy because the brother YAHAWAH'S, he's in Puerto Rico right now. He was actually doing videos earlier based on Puerto Rico. When you go to these different countries and you go to the Northern Kingdom countries, they have a lot of museums where it shows a lot of slavery that went down. All right, and that's why I put that little idol in the back where it has a black man, you know, statue. And he's in chains, and basically, you know, over there they have a lot of history when you go into it, showing, all right, the transatlantic slave trade routes. You go to Puerto Rico, like I said, the brother YAHAWAH'S out there right now, and he just went into a museum, which I got to finish watching that video. All right, but it was showing roots of our people, man. All right, and I remember a couple years back when I went to Puerto Rico, I got to witness the west side of Puerto Rico, not the tourist side, but the west side, where the west side was heavy because there was a lot of Taino Indian statues that were out there, and it was showing the roots of our people. It was showing, how we were attached in to the tribes of Israel. All right, you will even find out there in those caves, Hebrew written in those places, man. All right, and that ain't just in Puerto Rico. You go to Dominican Republic, you're gonna find stuff there. You go to down to the South America. All right, you go to these other different places, Venezuela, Peru. All right, all these places have some type of history to point us in the direction to show us who we are, man. And we're the only ones that have that culture, that type of evidence, showing that we are the true people of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, man. All right. And I really ain't got to go no more into the video. There's only a little bit left anyway. But it just shows you, the what they're trying to reenact, through their dancing, showing you that there was a guy that was bringing the slaves in, and then he started beating on the woman, started beating on the slaves, and basically the whole song, like I just read to you, I'm gonna read it one more time, all in its entirety. It says, in the 1600s, when the tyrant reigned, the history lived on the streets of Cartagena. When those slave traders came here, Africans were enslaved, and they kissed my land because of the perpetual slavery. Then it says, in African marriage, slaves of a Spaniard, he treated him really poorly, and he hit his black woman. And it was then that the handsome black man rebelled. He took revenge for his love, and you can still hear it in Berja. Don't hit my black woman, and then it goes into because she respects me. The abuser hit the young woman, and he told her no, and that's what he's saying in Spanish. It sounds better in Spanish, all right, and with the song. But that's basically what he's singing, a song of oppression, man, and telling you a piece of our history that actually happened. So in the 1600s, that's what these people were doing. They were bringing through the transatlantic slave trade our brothers from the Southern Kingdom, all right, and they were oppressing the shit out of them, man, all right, beating them, beating the woman, and we know this is history that Esau has always done, all right, and that just goes to show you that. Let me grab this. This is what's that? Jeremiah 50 and 33, and it says, "Thus saith the Lord Yahweh." It says, the children of Israel and the children of Judah were oppressed together, and all that took them captives held them fast, and they refused to let them go. So we were all oppressed together. There's no such thing. It was just because you got a lot of black only Israelites. Yeah, everybody just think that you got a lot of them that just think it was just the so-called black man, all right, that are the Israelites, and that's it. Nah, man, we had our people, right? Remember, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, all right? They were all oppressed together, in different times, all right? Sometimes it was at the same time, okay? But it was different eras, like we know that the Northern Kingdom went into captivity first, and then came the Southern Kingdom, but eventually in the same exact spot, all right, they were also oppressed together, all right? And it just goes to prove that these are the things that Esau was doing, man, to our people, all right? And there's no way around it, okay? Even through the music and movies, they'll pretty much have their tongue fall upon them. Okay, let me just grab this. This is Obadiah. This is Obadiah 1 and 10, and it says, For the violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. All right. So going into that perpetual hatred, when you go into Ezekiel, the 35th chapter, all right, it says, let me grab it at 5. It says, because thou hast had a perpetual hatred. All right. And that's what they were singing in that song about perpetual slavery. Okay. It says, because thou hast had a perpetual hatred and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, in the time that their iniquity had an end. Therefore, Yahweh, Hashem Yahweh, till blood, and blood shall pursue thee. Thou say, since thou hast not hated blood, even blood shall pursue thee. You see, it says, thus will I make Mount Seir most desolate, and cut off from it him that passeth out, him that returneth. Okay. And, you know, the Lord going to cut him off completely. All right. But before he does, he going to bring him into captivity. The same thing that he did to us, brought us into captivity. He has to go through the same exact thing. All right. That's Revelations 13:9. And it says, if any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. All right. And he has to be, you know, taken out with the sword. All right. Because that's the only way you could cleanse the blood off this land, like it tells you in Numbers 35 and 33, right? It says, so shall ye not pollute the land wherein ye are, for blood it defileth the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. You see, so he has to be, you know, he has to go through bloodshed himself. All right. That's how we're going to truly cleanse this land. He's going to serve that captivity first, and then after that, the Lord going to literally deteriorate this nigga. All right, where he ain't never going to be heard of ever again, because that's why the earth is going to be in the whole entire earth is going to be in righteousness, is going to be at peace, even down to the animals and down to, you know, the trees, and the whole earth itself. All right, is going to be at rest, because there's going to be no one to destroy the earth, because that's what this devil has always done. He has destroyed everything that comes in his path. You see, so. You know, that's pretty much the point. I just wanted to share that real quick on the, you know, on that video, just to show a little something different, you know, through an actual music video, you know, that came into mind when I was reading, you know, that book yesterday, going into King James being, you know, a so-called black man. And it made me think about it, you know. So, Lord willing, it was edifying, you know. So with that being said, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahushai, call Halonim La Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Bachakodash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Blessings and salutations to the hopeful elect that scattered abroad, the Akim and the Aquat that was listening in. Yahweh Ratazah, Lord willing, that the lesson was edifying. To the next one, Shalom. Keep fighting the good fight of faith and doing as good soldiers of Yahweh Shai. You sisters continue to learn the silence. March of the true men of the Lord. And may Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai be with you and your households. Shalom.